Hey friends, so today I am going to do a sourdough starter to get it started to make some bread. My plan is to walk you through each step. That's easy enough. However, I normally forget. So I'm going to get this started. I'm going to show you the best way. So normally I do measure with just measuring cups, that type of measurement. But the best and most successful way is to measure by weight with a kitchen scale. It's just more accurate and it gives you a better rise to your starter. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you how I start and how I get my dough, or rather how I get my starter going for dough. So here we go. Let me turn this on some more light. Okay, so I'm going to put my jar on my kitchen scale. I'm going to zero it out. So this is my starter that I have left over. As you can see, it's a tiny amount. You don't have to have a ton of starter to get going. You can have a small amount. You can have much larger. I will show you before this video is over how much sourdough discard I have that I have as backup, plus backup, plus backup, plus back up to about the 6th degree. So anyways, this is how much I have. I'm not sure if I'm going to use all this. I'm going to measure it and see. So I have my jar zeroed out. I'm going to add this sourdough starter. If I can get it in here without dropping any. Let's see how much this is. So this is, let me get to an even number. It'll be easier to measure. Well, I may use it all. Okay, so I have 30 grams of starter in this jar. And as you can see, there's still some starter in here. And honestly, I could keep this and use this jar, scrape it all down, and make more starter from here. So I'll decide if I'm going to keep this, or I may scrape it out with this nice little rubber spoon and put it with some of my other discard. So I have 30 grams of starter. So now I'm going to add filtered water. I am going to double this. So I will add 60 grams of water. So I'm going to just zero it back out and add 60 grams. Okay. I'm going to give this a stir. So you can do a 1:1:1 ratio, but I'm going to do a 1:2:2. So 1 part starter, 2 parts water, 2 parts flour. So this was my 2 parts water, which was 60 grams. So now I'm going to do 60 grams of flour. I'm splitting it up. So I just have a tiny bit of fresh ground flour that I have left over. So I'm just going to use the rest of it before I grind more. Let me dump this in there. Okay, so that was 17 grams. So the rest of it I'm going to use in some King Arthur all-purpose unbleached flour. So 60 grams of flour as well. So I'm just going to stir this all up. I'm going to get it all mixed up. Make sure there's no flour. All the flour's combined with the water and the other starter that I had in here. And just mix it really well. Scrape all that off the sides. And I just smash up all the flour bits that might be in there to make sure it's all combined. So let me see if I can show you what this looks like. Hopefully you can see down there. So it's just a nice thick starter in here. Hopefully you can see that well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this marker and just mark on the side of my jar where my starter is. So when it starts to rise, I can see how much it's risen. And then when it either doubles or triples, then I'll know it's ready to go. It's ready to mix up with my dough and start baking. Okay, so now that I've got that mixed up, I've got it marked. I'm gonna set it here on my counter to let it rise. So I'm just gonna take this, as you can see, this is a pickle jar, an old pickle jar that obviously has been cleaned, so it no longer smells like pickles. I'm just gonna set the lid right on top of it. Now, if I'm using any other random jar that I have and I don't have a lid or I can't find it quick enough, I will set a saucer, a plate, a bowl, anything. There's even those fancy, cute little bowl covers or jar covers that you could even sit on top of it. Just place something on it loosely so it still has, it can get air in there, it can breathe, and it can grow. So my kitchen stays a little bit cold, or cool. I shouldn't say cold, but it's cooler than the rest of my house. So what works for me is this nice seed mat that I purchased last year from Amazon. So what I do is I just wrap it around my jar, and it doesn't touch my jar. As you can see, it's kind of loosely wrapped around there. Let me see if I can move it so you can see it good. It's just, it came rolled up, so I just leave, when I get done using it, I just roll it right back up and store it on the shelf. So it's just loosely rolled around there, just kind of fits around, and I just plug it in. This one doesn't have temperature controls, so it's just one temperature, and it just creates a nice warm temperature in here. So this is what I have found works best for me in the spring, in the fall, and in the winter, just because my kitchen stays a little cooler. So I'll let this sit. I'll keep an eye on it throughout the day to see how the starter rises, and then we will pick back up a little later when it's ready to mix up the dough. I needed some more fresh milled flour for this recipe, so I took my grain mill and attached it to my mixer. Once I got it all attached, I turned my mixer on and then added my wheat berries to grind some more flour. So here's the sourdough discard I promised to show you. So I had 1, 2, 3, about 7 total, maybe 8. I had all these had been stored in my refrigerator, plus I have some dried discard that I have stored in my cabinet. Along the way, I was going to use these for discard recipes, and probably have used some, but it was just more than I needed. And it sat in my refrigerator longer, and it's gotten a little more sour smell and would have a more sour taste to it than I wanted in any of my recipes. So I've just left it. So now it's back up. I can combine those all in one jar, and I probably need to, but I just haven't yet. So my sourdough is risen, or my starter rather has risen, and it's ready to mix the dough. As I was making this recipe, or as I'm dumping my starter in here, I was trying to decide, did I want to make the full recipe or half it? The full recipe makes 2 loaves. So by the time I had my starter in there, I realized I wasn't going to have enough starter to do the full recipe. So I had enough, I had 2/3 of the starter that I needed. So during this process, I am calculating in my head how much flour is 2/3, how much salt is 2/3, how much water is 2/3. I did not want to mess this recipe up. This was the first time I'd used this recipe, and I did not want to mess it up because it's a good one. Roasted garlic and olive. What can go wrong? Okay, so we've measured our starter, and now I'm going to add in the water that I've already measured. And I measure my water separately because I do like to put it in the microwave and warm it for about 30 seconds. So I'm going to add the water into my starter, and then once it gets all added, I'm going to mix it until the starter is completely dissolved in the water. So I'll just mix it until that starter dissolves and it becomes like this milky liquid. Okay, so now that the starter is completely dissolved in there, there's no solid form of it. It's all liquid now mixed in with the water, and it's real milky looking. Now I'll start adding my flour and the rest of my ingredients for my dough. So I've ground some hard red wheat for flour. I'm going to also do this a half and half. So I'm going to do half of this hard red wheat flour, and then the other half this King Arthur all-purpose unbleached flour. So I'm going to zero out my scale again, and then I will measure in my flour. So I'm actually not doing half and half. I did 2/3 of the measurement of the fresh ground flour. I'm only doing 1/3 of it of the King Arthur flour. My brain was in overload as I'm trying to figure out all the measurements. I've already had to decrease the recipe. Now I'm trying to figure out how and making sure I'm getting it right. In my mind, I was calculating and recalculating and recalculating. I'm just going to give this a quick stir, and then I will add the rest of the ingredients, which will be salt. And then in this recipe, I'm actually going to be adding some oil, which is not normal for any other recipe. This is just a new recipe I'm trying from Acts of Sourdough. This is her roasted garlic and olive. So it actually has oil in the dough. This is the only recipe I've ever used that has oil in the dough. So I'll add the salt. There's my oil. So now I just mix this as best I can with the rubber spatula, spoon spatula thing, and then I'll dig in and mix it the rest of the way with my hands until it's just mixed, and then I'll let it sit for about an hour. So what I'm doing, I'm just turning the dough over, and I'm making sure I get all the flour all mixed in so there's no bits of flour. Okay, so now that I've gotten it all mixed up, I'm just gonna scrape this off my hands, put all this dough in here, and then I'm gonna cover it and let it sit for 1 hour. And then I'll come back and do a stretch and fold. So it's been about 45 minutes resting time. So I have my hand wet, and I'm going to just pick this up, my dough up, and fold it over. So now I'm wanting to start to create a smoother looking dough, and just start doing these stretch and folds. Total of 3 stretch and folds, 30 to 45 minutes apart. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's making like little releases of air, and I wish you could smell it because it smells really, really good. Okay, I'm gonna do just a couple more. But also, I'm not sure if you can see, that's the dough making that noise, it's funny. Anyways, it's much smoother than it was. So earlier it was still real shaggy looking. So just those few folds have already smoothed the dough out a lot. So I'm going to cover it up and let it sit another 30 to 45 minutes. So after all the stretch and folds, the dough rested another 30 to 45 minutes, and then it was the lamination process, which I dusted the countertop with some flour, got the dough out of the bowl and stretched it, and then I added in the olives and roasted garlic. Once that's done, I will fold the dough up and tuck it all in for the night with those roasted garlic and olives. The roasted garlic was all but mush. It smelled so good, but it was hard to figure out how I was going to put it in there, in the dough rather. So I just wiped it, squeezed it in my fingers, and then just wiped it on the dough, put the oil in there. But once I get this all done, I'm going to roll it up, put it back in the bowl, and cover it, and it's going to sit on the countertop overnight. Okay, so our dough has sat overnight. So this morning we are going to, or I'm going to rather, dump this dough out, cut it into, I think I'm going to do 2 loaves. I'm going to do larger loaves today. I'm going to cut it into 2 loaves, shape it, put it in my bowls, and then put it in the fridge for an hour, 2 hours, until I get ready to cook it. So as you can see, it's really risen overnight, and it smells so good. It's got a lot of nice bubbles all in it from where it's risen. That roasted garlic smells so yummy. Okay, so I'm gonna flour this a little bit and dump this dough onto here. It's so soft. This dough is so incredibly soft. Okay, so I'm just going to, let me see if I can move it back a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Okay, move it over. So I'll just cut it in half. Then look on the inside, you can see those olives and pieces of garlic all in there. Yum, yum, yum. Can't wait to try it. It's got a lot of nice airy bubbles in it. So I'm just going to fold it over and shape it. Just going to make it into a little round ball here. Create some tension. Just pull it towards me, and I'm turning it as I pull it towards me. I'm just tucking my hands under and slowly pulling it towards me, creating some tension in the dough. Okay, so now I have a nice pretty ball. I'm going to take this and just put it right inside of my bowl. I have some flour in this bowl. I don't normally have a problem with it sticking, so hopefully it won't today either, but we'll see. So I've just turned it upside down in the bowl, and I'm just making sure it's not gapping open. So I'm just kind of pulling those over and the edges over and tucking them in and just patting them down so everything's nice and sealed in there. So just like this, I'll put this in the refrigerator for an hour or 2. And then I will cook it. So I'm going to do the same thing with my other half. Just going to flatten it out Look, you can kind of see that garlic in there a little better. Oh, it looks so yummy and it smells so good. All right, tuck this over. Roll it up. Tuck these olives back in here that are trying to escape. Shove them back in the dough. Okay, so the same thing. I'm gonna take my bowl, put the dough in the bowl, tuck everything over, try to keep all my olives in there. This side must have had more olives in it than the other because they are wanting to peep out. All right, then I'll just put these two in the fridge until they've chilled an hour or two. I'll heat my oven up and get it going, and I will see you when we get ready to bake. Okay, so now it's been about 2 hours. I'm ready to bake. So I took my loaves out of the refrigerator. I'm just gonna dump them upside down on my parchment paper. So I reuse my parchment paper until it starts getting burned and is no longer usable. So I put my loaf on my parchment paper. I don't have a fancy bread lane. I just use a knife, whichever one I can get, whichever one I grab first. So I'm gonna take my knife and just make a slit all the way from one end to the other through the bread. So let's see if I can get you to see this a little better. So I just made a slit here into the bread to open it up. And so that'll help open it up during the baking, when it bakes. So I'm gonna take my other loaf, do the same exact thing, turn it upside down, put it on this parchment paper, cut it, and then put it in the oven. So what I do that's a little different is I have started doing an open bake method. So I don't bake in a Dutch oven. I am gonna do a comparison soon to see if I bake in a Dutch oven, again, how I like it now compared to my open bake method. So what I do is I have my oven preheated to 490. I have my, I just use a Pampered Chef pizza stone. So I have my pizza stone in there. I have a cast iron skillet underneath it, and it's all heated to 190. So once I get ready to put this bread in the oven, I'm gonna place these two loaves on the parchment paper. Obviously on the parchment paper. I'm gonna pick this whole thing up, put it on the pizza stone, and then I will put boiling water in my cast iron skillet. Now, I think the best method is to have lava stones. I haven't got any yet. I will be getting some. They just haven't had any, and I haven't ordered any yet. In the stores I've been in, they haven't had any. So I am just doing boiling water. I just put the boiling water in the cast iron skillet. So that's what I've got going on now. My water is actually starting to boil. So I'm gonna make a slit in this loaf, and then I'm gonna get these in the oven. And then we will see what they look like and taste like when they come out. Okay, here they are out of the oven. Nice and brown and toasty, and they smell so good. I can't wait to cut it and taste them. So this is the first time I have made this recipe. So what I did again was I baked them in the oven on 490. This was an open bake method. They were on the parchment paper. I sat them on the pizza stone, 490 degrees. Underneath the stone that had the bread on it was a cast iron skillet that I poured boiling water in to create the steam. They baked for 19 minutes on 490. I took the steam out of the oven, Then I set my timer for an additional 10 minutes. And they cooked an additional 10 minutes without the steam. So now I've pulled them out of the oven and they're sitting here on this cooling rack. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share.